So it's a little bit loud. My name is David Sichterman. I work with Technicon, as you can see. A quick intro about myself. I graduated design school a few years ago and quickly got into alias modeling. I was a contractor for a couple of years, working at nearly every car studio around Southern California. And it was pretty cool. I didn't know anything about being a contractor. It was great for me because instead of working for the whole time that I've been out of school in one company, this way I got to sort of flavor everybody. I got to go around and learn all the goods and bads of every studio. Part of a byproduct of being through design school, I'm sure most of you in the room have a little bit of experience with this, if not a lot, is you're pretty comfortable in front of a group. So Technicon asked me to come on board and be their instructor as part of their academy in San Juan Capistrano. So that's what I do. I teach the alias classes, and then occasionally I still go out and I work with the companies to keep up to date on what's happening in the studios. Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is, as you can see, a super fast sketch modeling technique. As I'm sure a lot of you know, there is some Class A work that happens in the Southern California area, but basically where I'm from, where I'm working, doing most of my work, it's mostly sketch modeling. It's mostly concept studios and it's show car stuff. So what it becomes is we need somebody for 3 weeks and we gotta, bang out a couple of designs quickly. So what I'm about to show you is actually the middle class that we teach at the Academy at Technicon. We call it the Advanced Concept Modeling class, or ACM. And so, as people have asked me, really, can you make a car body in 2 days? Yeah, about the end of the first day, I've got all the 3D curves blocked in. Most of the slabs connecting those bits are done, and I'm starting to make the corners come around. By the start of the second day, I have every major slab done. I'm working on the transitions, and I give myself the rest of the second day to finish up all the fillets, throw some shaders on there and render it. So while that's a 2-day process, I have an hour to show you guys how I model a whole car body. So I'm going to fly through the presentation first. I have all the alias models of all the steps along the way to answer questions afterward, if you guys want that. Okay? Just tell me, make in your notes, make a note of what step you have a question on. I'll go right back to it, and I'll open up the alias model, and I'll show you how I did that. Okay? So I need this. Put this in my pocket. All right. I'm not one that likes to read along with a paragraph of a presentation. I'm sure we've all sat through those kinds of things where someone just stands there and reads the whole thing. If you want the big long paragraph about this class and what it does, go get the handout. It's available to you. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is a 2D sketch modeling the curves to 3D curves to making basic slabs to the building fillets and blends at the very end. That's the gist of this class. Okay? Key learning objectives, they ask us to do this. Again, 2D curves to 3D curves. The designer's priorities, like I asked earlier, how many designers we have in the room. Big advantage to working in this style is that you're able to make huge broad stroke changes to the model very quickly without having to do it, literally no delete and rebuild. I'll show you that. And the alias software is great for design tool. It is. A lot of people are migrating toward Modo or Maya for the polygon stuff, and then they get to remodel everything back in NURBS because ultimately that's what we need. And I think you guys will probably see by the end of this, you can knock out a car body pretty quick. I'm basically making the sell that we don't really need polygon just yet. NURBS is pretty good if you use it the right way. Anyway, zoning history. I say it's time to move on. Forget the past. There are some folks out there in the industry that don't like working with any kind of construction history at all, and there are some that leave it on all the time. And I'll talk a little bit near the end there of when it's time to let that kind of stuff go. I'm breaking the presentation into these 3 parts: measure twice, cut once, work smarter, not harder, and then of course when to let go of the past, the history. Okay, so the measure twice, cut once. Basically, I use this phrase. I'm a pilot, so everything that we do in the air is all for phrases, helps us remember things, like aviate, navigate, communicate, fly the plane first, then navigate, then talk on the radio. Anyway, so measure twice, cut once, something my dad always told me. Basically, if you lay out your curves nicely at the beginning, the setup is everything. If you do it properly, you're going to save yourself a whole lot more time further on down the road. I can tell you guys, as I teach the classes in San Juan, this is something that's actually pretty hard to get across to people because we all go through design school and we're all taught to build a model bit by bit by bit. In other words, I'm going to focus my first few days on just getting that front end perfect, and then I'm going to work on the shoulder, and then I'm going to work around the back of the car, and then I'll work on the DLO. No, guys, take the time in the very beginning to block in all the curves that you need. Basically, what you're going to wind up having by the time you're done with this process is the whole car made in just curves. They're all in 3D curves. At that point, it just becomes skins that you're connecting over it. And there's a really cool tool they put, I think it started in Alias 2013, the proportional crown. 13 or 14 it started. I think it's 13. Proportional crown's great. I was recently in Detroit a couple weeks ago, and a little tidbit, proportional crown with lean is coming. I can't wait for that. They're actually going to give us the opportunity to give it one influence or the other, so the actual crown will lean to one side and give that surface acceleration. Can't wait. That'll be awesome. Anyway, so that's one of the backbones of this whole process, is you can basically block in 80% of the car with skins. Give it proportional crown, give it some volumes, connect the corners, and move on. That's what I'm about to show you. So anyway, like I said, you start with 3D curves, leads to skins. That entire model is skins and blends and maybe a couple squares that you see on the right. That's how the entire thing was made. So 2D curves, again, like I tell the class, take the time, guys. What I do is it's sort of back in the day when we had homework in design school. You know, you got 40 renderings to crank out in just a few nights. So what do? You lay out all the line work first, and then you lay all the base of the rendering for the next. Then you put the glare over the bottom of the rendering, then hit it with the chalk at the very end, then spray it over and take it outside and hit it with hairspray so nothing comes off, all that stuff. Assembly line. So like I said, like I teach the classes, when you're going to go block in a model, the entire model I can block in, I can get it 80 to 90% there in 2-degree curves. Okay, I can lean that center CV back and forth a little bit and I can get it pretty close. I'm not doing this for accuracy. Of course I can go back and dial up the math of all of them. In fact, when it's time to start connecting all these things, I'll grab all the curves and dial up to 5. What I'm doing though is by staying with super low math in the beginning, I can knock out the entire view in about 5 minutes. So I've done all of my curves for all 3 views, 4 views, front, rear, side, profile and plan view, in about a half an hour to an hour. That's all done. Now I can start deciding which of those curves need to be tuned up and made better, which ones need to be tuned up to build a corner, and which ones I can just leave alone the way they are and not even worry about it. But I got them all in place very quickly because I kept the math low, which I believe is one of the 10 golden rules they talk about with Alias. Anybody else come from that class a little while ago? All right. So super low math. It's the fastest way. A lot of folks that come to my classes, they've had some Alias training from some of the design schools, and they just start clicking degree 5 curves. Like, guys, you're wasting your time. You're moving all those little CVs around. Just degree 2, man. Get it close, bump it around. When you're ready, dial it up. It's the fastest way to get through this. So, the next step of this process, I've met a lot of people. I've met pros, people who have been doing this for 20 years, and they're very good at pulling CVs around in 3D space. Great. For surfaces, for curves, whatever. Yeah, that's an art, and I respect that. However, when I do a sketch model, when I'm doing it my way, I need this thing to get done. I need to block it in as fast as I can so that I can spend the rest of my time, my budgeted time, refining it and working with the designer making other changes. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the front end moving CVs around in 3D. So what I do, as you can see here, these curves were all designed in the plan view. I personally like skins. I've talked to a lot of people, they see this method, they say, ah, cool, but why don't you use a rail? Why don't you use a multi-surface draft or these kind of things? You can if you want. It's the same process. You use one of the curves from one of the views, and you make a wall, and you basically project it from the other direction, one of the other views, and instead of using curves on surface, you use curves. That's the skin. There's another screen that comes up later where it actually shows the options of that. But you project a curve instead of curves on surface. That's an option in there. And you play around with the settings that you like. I usually leave it as, match original. So that if I'm building a corner later on between a couple of projected curves and the corner isn't quite looking nice and the curve plot isn't so good, I go back to the originals and dial up their math and it works great. I suddenly get the nice clean curve plot. So instead of geometry average or something like that, I just do match original, leave it at that. I like skins because later on down the road, this is super fast. Copy the curve, bring it up, skin in between, project from the side view as you see there, boom, it's done. And it all has history. So later on, I can go to the skin, turn on the proportional crown, give it that puff, and it'll lean that line in and out. Still has history, but now I have a little bit of freedom as I go to build the rest of the car. Like I tell everybody, a car is a pretty complex shape. And my hat's off to the guy that can, or the guy or gal that can model the front end, fall in love with the front end and slowly work their way back, and that fender just happens to land perfectly. No, never happens that way. There are some broad stroke, huge areas of the car that need to be blocked in first. Talk to a clay modeler, the clay modeler will tell you it's a side DLO. You talk to an experienced Alias modeler, they'll tell you it's usually the cant rail. You talk to a design student that's had a lot of philosophy and design people talking to them, they'll say it's the base of the car. You got to work your way up from a good foundation, all those things. Okay, I say that the whole car basically evolves together. It all comes together and nears the time for fillets and blends together at the same time. The shoulder meeting the wraparound, meeting the front and the clip, and the window side DLO touchdown, how that wraps around becomes the A-pillar, and the front camber around the hood, the whole thing. It all kind of evolves together. And with that said, I have history in all of my main curves that are driving that. I didn't spend 2 weeks building the front of this beautiful Audi only to get 3/4 of the way through and figure, oh my goodness, I just made a Lambo. It's way too wide and too low. It's wrong. Great. I get to redo it again. Okay? So everything is driven by a few curves. I think I've made that point by now. Okay, so again, the first steps here is to basically take the 2D curves and project it to the wall that you've made using what I call the other view. There's a trick to this. As you're going to do this, the curve that you're using to make that wall is usually the longer of the two. Designers, again guys, no offense to the design guys here, they're trying their hardest. They've got a lot on their plate and they're trying their hardest to give you sketches. This is a rare thing, and we kind of cheat in the classes, being that I give them straight orthographics. I don't think I've ever gotten straight orthographics in all the time that I've been doing this stuff. You always get a front 3/4 sketch or a side tip up, and it's your job to kind of translate that the best you can. They give you some packaging data, maybe the cube dimensions overall, width, length, height, that sort of thing. It helps you kind of block it in, but you're never given straight on pictures like this, straight on sketches. In this case, I got a class, I got to teach people that maybe just started Alias a week ago, so we cheat, and we drive these curves right over a sketch. With that said, you can choose, and the sketches don't quite line up perfectly, as this always happens. And when you do make sketches, even the most experienced designers out there, even using Photoshop with the guides and all this stuff, it's tough to make the end view match the side view, match the front view, match the plan view. It's very tough to get those lines to line up perfectly. What I'm getting at is, when it's time to figure out which of those curves, because of course you made all the curves based on sketches, when it's time to choose which curve you make the wall from, I don't know if I use the base or the one in the plan view or the one in the rear, use the one that is longer. That becomes the wall, and you can tweak around and move around the shorter one, and you've always got real estate in the wall you've projected to for it to work. Okay? So, for step 4, fine tuning. This is one that basically, when it comes to make changes to the curves, a lot of times you'll look at that plan view and you'll look at the cant rail, the base of the windows. These are good examples of areas where it's just not quite right. You go to do the plan view stuff, you built your wall, you project from the other side, you look at it, it just doesn't look right in 3D. So you have to go back and you have to nudge around the curves that drove the wall. If you're using a multi-surface draft or a rail, great, you only got one curve. I don't mind using two because I've done a skin. I've got a bottom and an upper. You could even do an offset if that's the way you like to do it. You could offset the plan view, skin in between. You moved around, it's got history and it goes. I'm a big proponent of working Alias and pushing it to use as much history as I can. And I've learned that for most operations, Alias can handle 3 to 5 levels of history. After that, it starts to go nuts. So it's okay. If I got 3 or 4 trims to a surface, there's another one, I'll untrim the whole thing, reproject some areas, trim it out again. I'm all right, it's back to 1 level. Anyway. This is what I'm getting at. If it comes time to kind of try to make this thing work, especially when it's time to make 3D curves, a lot of times your curve plot that goes in between the two of them is going to be crazy. Again, I know some artists that are fantastic at doing this in 3D. They can grab CVs and tug them around and they can make these curve combs. If I had all day to make 3 curves work together, I probably could do that too. I don't. I got to get this whole car made in 3D curves by lunchtime. The entire thing. So I don't mess with it. If that curve plot is not looking nice, just basically projecting to the wall and going up the other way, I dial up the math of the native curves that I use to project. Does everybody understand what I mean? 3 degrees to 5 degrees. I just dial up the math. Now the curve plot works. There's enough math for it to be complex in one direction, be projected to a surface, and now there's enough there for it to align 1°5 and get a decent curve plot. Okay? So the next section here, what I call smarter, not harder. Right? This is basically, you've got all the curves in place now. If you were doing it the old hard way, you would have spent the last day or two only building the front end or only building the DLO or some of the more important areas the designer keeps emphasizing. In this case, like I said, I've got the entire car made of wireframe. So now all I do is skin and freeform blend and I can get there very quickly. This allows me to work with the designer over and over and over again and make broad changes. So by the time in a course of a week to a week and a half, I've made 10 different versions of this model with the designer, whereas a lot of people are working on their second or third from the old method. Okay, so that's why I call it harder, not smarter. Like I said before, first step is to basically build skins. And with that wireframe to work with, it's easy. You can go around the model and say, well, a couple of, 1, 2, 3 across the back of the car, there's one skin. The same thing down the side of the car, give it some crown, there's the side of the car. You can literally block in, like I've said, 70 to 80% of this model in the first day. By the time the first day is over, you've got all the curves made in 3D, you've got the skins, it's starting to look like the car. In fact, one of the things I tell my classes is that a part of this job, a big part of this job, is to get enough progress done to where when the designer does walk by, you've got something to show them and talk about. You got something for the person to sink their teeth into. Ideally, it would all be this setup like Design Works, where you've got a designer and a modeler working right next to each other. But most of the places, it's more like Kia. It's more like Nissan, where you've got the design people that work at one end of the room and the 3D modelers over there. The design guys are going down to the clay room. They're coming over there and talking. They're sitting through a meeting. They never come by. They come by a couple times a day. So when they do come by and you catch them, you got to have something on the screen to show them that they can talk about. That's what's great about this process as well. The whole thing is evolving in large chunks together. You didn't spend all day working on one part of the car and they come back 2-3 hours later and you're just barely getting to the next. No, the whole thing evolves very quickly. So again, 3/4 of the way near the end of the first day, I've got the entire car blocked in. A little more than this, I'm starting to build the corners. The way that I like to do the corners, I don't push blend curves very much in the ACM class because blend curves, I try to avoid things that lead me to noodle. Does everybody here know what I mean by noodling? Right, spending all day just kind of tugging and pulling on one little command. I don't like that. So if I've got a surface that allows me to just click, click, and I don't have to make any curves, that's the greatest, freeform blend. I do that, connect ends, modify range, tug them down wherever I need. If I still want that edge to do this sort of thing, I blow away its history, manually align it, and keep going, okay? So the point that I make with this one, with this slide here, well, both these images I should say, is we've already blocked in the ends and the sides with the simple skins. We all know how fast that is. Click, click, done. Give it a little proportional crown, bang. Okay, so you've done down the back, you've come down the side of the thing, wrapping around the corner, forget about it. I've heard before that 90% of the time, or most of the time, even more than 90% of the time, the rear corners and the front corners of the car have nothing to do with the side of the car because there's a big wheelhouse in the middle. Nobody really needs to know that surface isn't really connecting. Well, for the purposes of a sketch model, just to get it blocked in, let the designer see the volumes and the forms of this thing, there's nothing wrong with doing a freeform blender on the whole corner. All I know is, in a second, I'm going to have wheel flats and fenders made, and it looks like well, you can kind of see that surface isn't there, but it's an awfully small gap. I've got the corner made, I've got the fender flat, the wheel flat made, the fenders coming together. You can kind of see what this whole area of the car is going to look like. Yeah, okay, I got it, keep going. It works. Gets the job done for that 30 seconds the designer happened to be walking by. Same thing happens around the top of the car. Again, this is one of the things that I've gone into long debates with experienced modelers and designers and other teachers. You got to spend a lot of time. You got to get that cant rail looking beautiful. Really? You can get it pretty close with a skin. You can modify the curves top and bottom. These guys here that have been used to make that one. Maybe a pointer on this thing would be cool. Anyway, you can modify those curves. You can even modify the proportional crown so you get rid of most of the wobble down the A-pillar and you're set up. Now you have a skin that comes down the side of the car. You've got skins around the back. You wrap around another freeform blend, tug it around, modify it. With a little bit of love, you've got the entire cant rail built. Rather than spending a half a day getting all those curves sweet and skinning and building and freeform blending and squaring the entire cant rail, which only gives you a cant rail, I've got the entire side of the greenhouse done and relating with the top and making that cant rail lines done. It's close enough, and I'll show you then a little bit later down the way how we hide that. When I teach the classes, I've got 3 or 4 people in the room with me. Half the people are going to have a wobbly, bumpy, lumpy cant rail. It's okay. I show them, guys, you really can. You can literally trim it back, freeform blend over the edge, it's gone. You can't even see it anymore. It got the job done, and the car was modeled. Once you've got that built, it's time to intersect and trim. Pretty straightforward. We've all done millions of intersect trim operations. You've done it. You've set yourself up in a way where you've slightly overbuilt it. You can intersect, trim it out, and you're left with a trim out cant rail. Again, this is, for me, usually this is getting to be about the early morning, mid-morning of the second day. I'm here. It's coming together. Same exact process works around the front of the car. Again, I've got all these 3D curves to deal with, so I can simply make a front fender. I go across the whole front of the car with the hood, the bumpers, everything with the skin, give it as much proportional crown that I need to get it close. Okay? And let's see, down the side of it, rear fender, same thing. This was, on this particular model, the car's a little goofy. It's got a shoulder that bleeds into a front fender, and that all in typical envelope body like we're used to seeing. The rear is this VW bug-looking bubble little fender that hangs off the car. So that required me to actually make a curve. Again, low math, tug the CVs around a little bit, just one curve, and then skin in between and give it some proportional crown. Okay, at this phase, I don't know what it's going to need to tie in down here, but in a second, like I'm going to show you guys, from side of the car to the side of the car is just another skin. And I dial out the proportional crown to give it some puff until I get the size that I want, blow its history away, turn on some symmetric modeling and move the CVs from side to side to give it that pinch on the corner. Then I come back to this fender to make sure the highlight runs together. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, across major areas of the body, skins, yeah, same thing, like I just explained. So here we have, this started life as a skin, and I dialed up the proportional crown until from a side view, the end of the bumper is about where it needs to be. Then I blow away its history, I turn on symmetric modeling, and I start tugging around the CVs, and everything stays nice. I'll turn on that shader, look at how the zebra stripes will be working with this part, get it pretty close as I move these guys around, and then in between it, surprise, Freeform blend does the job. And I'm able to obviously move around the CVs of the bumper, as well as dial up and down the proportional crown of that fender until it lines up. And bang, I've got it all done. I've come up from the fender, down into the bumper, made the corner of the car, finished. Awfully simple. And that's what I was talking about. That's what I'll do. I'll just dial up and down the proportional crown of the fender up above, and the bumper down below, move the CVs. Now, until it works, I'll finish one thought first. Obviously, we as 3D modelers struggle with this. We'll get something that works nice, kind of fall in love with it. Then you talk with the designer. I'd like to see a little less volume. Could you make this a little puffier? Do you realize that makes me go back and remodel it? Fine, it's okay. It's got history. You could actually do a query edit on that surface and let the designer find the volume that they like. And okay, now the surface looks wobbly in between, the little freeform blend. Okay, go away. I'll tie this together. I'll clean it up. That's not a big deal. Again, it's way faster, way more efficient than building the whole thing the old way, designer not liking it, and you get to delete and rebuild. I hate that. That's my arch rival is the delete and rebuild process. I try to avoid that as much as I possibly can, especially when it comes to working as a contractor in a studio. I don't like to look silly like that, deleting and rebuilding. So at this point, you've got the majority of the body blocked in. And like I said, you've started with 2D curves based on the canvas, so you have them in place. You can still go to a side view. You've got the DLO traced out that you took from the sketch, projected against the side outer greenhouse. By the way, it's probably a good point to point this out. I make this case with the classes that I teach. Again, you talk to a clay modeler and they'll tell you the most important thing is to block in the side DLO. It defines the character, the plan view of the car from front to back, the tumble home, the crown, the window. It's a very important piece of the car. And I get that, it is. However, it does cause a problem when it's time for us to tie in the A pillar, C pillar to the rest of the body, how to get the whole gesture of the car. So what I tell my classes is, we'll worry about windows later. Let's block in an outer greenhouse as if there's no windows. Forget about it. Let's just imagine there's stickers for now. And then we'll poke a hole and do the glass the right way. Another thing I try to tell the classes is if there's a way you can build it more Class A, more manufacturing, do it that way. I understand it in a sketch modeling environment where a lot of this is going to change when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes time to actually make this thing for real. But why would I take a huge shortcut in making something as simple as wheel flats when the actual Class A way of making wheel flats is pretty simple? Multi-surface draft, skin over, give it crown, call it a day. Blend down to the bottom so it ties in. Why would I let somebody just run a rail all the way around and be flat when a skin over the thing with a little bit of crown is very close to what we'd expect in the Class A side of things? Anyway, so in this case, I build the outer greenhouse because I want to see how this is relating to the body. And I got the curves in 2D, easy to project right through it. Boom, I got an opening. Now I can flip the model, and before I spent any time, again, the clay modeler likes to have the glass. Okay, I respect that, but I need the designer to see how that corner relates. I need the designer to make sure that he or she is happy where the A-pillar touches down. I need the designer to tumble that model around and make sure the overall feel of the car is what they were looking for. That's more important. So I block in the outer greenhouse, the entire top of the car, forgetting about windows. Obviously, there's going to be a huge cutout with a cowl down below in front of the windshield. Don't care at the moment. I don't really care how close that thing is to profile right now. How does the center line? I can go back, trim it out, move it down, and make it back over there. It's going to have a little ledge somewhere in there anyway. I don't mind. All I know is I got this thing working, a couple of blends in between the back, and it's actually starting to come together. It's almost finished. Anyway, I'll get to that in a second. I keep leading. I keep anticipating the slides before I show you guys. All right, so this is one of the tougher areas. As you see from the last slide, that's already done. Well, sort of. This part here is not actually, okay, I'm looking at this guy here. thinking it was the surface. That part, we sort of save that part for last as I do the class. I need to make sure everybody understands the process of the 2D curves, the 3D projection to make the curves and do skins and blends in between. Now let's do this. It's really the same thing overall as my message to the class, and that is to build obviously to theoreticals, another one of the golden rules. Block it out to theoreticals, and then run your fillets and blends. Reason why we all do that, as those of you who sat through that class also heard, I'm sure, why invest the time to do beautiful fillets over something that isn't blocked in yet? Let's make sure the design and everybody, the engineering department, let's make sure everybody is happy with the overall size of the car and the shape and where things are at before we invest the time in the filleting. That's, as some 3D modelers in the room will tell you, I'm pretty sure everybody knows, that's 3/4 of your time, is blends and fillets. Blocking in is quick. So what I do is I get all the car in, everybody's happy, like it, all right, I only want to do this filleting once. I don't like doing it as a period, so I only want to have to do this thing once. Anyway, so that little area we save for last. Now, with the car already blocked in, it's a pretty straightforward process of a couple of freeform blends. This is something that I can more or less say that I kind of invented. I didn't learn this. I had to go to Germany for a few months and work with Technicon to learn the proper way to teach alias, because obviously we all get into our own processes as we work with car companies. But they said, if you're going to go and need to teach with Autodesk, you have to know the proper way. So, all right, I went to Germany and I worked with them, and they already have an academy set up over there, and I had to go over there and learn the proper way. And they were doing a lot of squares and a lot of blend curves and this and that, especially even for a sketch modeler. Personally, I understand if you're doing Class A, the structure of the hull is just as important as the highlight and everything else. The wireframe, the surface patch layout is just as important as other things for things like translation and tooling and cutting and everything from CATIA, all that stuff. I understand it's important, but for sketch modeling, I don't really care what the hull is doing. As long as the other part aligns to it and it's looking okay. I'm not using spans. We all know why spans are our enemy. I'm using single span, you know, degree 5, degree 7, degree 3, hopefully, stuff like that, simple stuff. But when it comes to the hull, I don't really care if the hull's pretty. I say that because the hull structure for a freeform blend is always not so nice. And most of the time, it's all over the map. But for something like this, I can always trim it, convert it, make my nice looking hull out of this thing later on. What I want to do, I'm looking at highlight. Again, guys, I want it to be to this level by lunchtime of the second day or sooner. Okay, so I've made my fender. The designer walked by. Oh yeah, that's looking all right. Yeah, maybe a little bit of more. You got it. More volume. You got it. And I've got my shoulder right where the designer likes to see it. I'm just going to tie that in. I'm not going to spend half a day making sure my whole structure is pretty on that little blend. I just need to get it done. So what I do is a couple of blends, one across the top, one across the bottom. Obviously, I'm going to trim and project, project and trim this out so it lines up. A couple of tricks I like to use. I do a patch precision onto the surface to find what I call that sweet spot. And I keep doing that as I fill in this little patchwork puzzle here. I dial up and down the patch precision, align right to it. It's floating over the surface. I give it a different color so I can see about where I'm at. I still also see the highlight works. Good to go. The next step is to take a curve, project it to it, get it together, I project a curve from that direction, brings it down, and then I tie into my wheel flat and it's done. I think the next slide may show you, yeah. Okay, so from this part there, here you can see the curve, that guy. This is something else that I don't push too hard in the class because it's sort of an advanced thing and I don't want to confuse folks. But one of my favorite tools, one of my best friends in Alias is the projected, using a vector projection, I guess I should call it. I got real friendly with this tool when I had to make fog lamps for this Hyundai, this huge sedan for Hyundai that was recently at the auto shows. I made the front and rear fog lamps that had all these little fins. And the only way that we could do it, because everybody's a cook in the kitchen, the designers all come by and everybody has a different opinion of it, I had projection vectors about every 4 or 5 flutes that I could bump it around and it would all have history. And if I had to rebuild that every time, we never would have got that part done. But anyway, that's like, cool. I rarely ever use X, Y, or Z for projections. I always throw a vector in there, even if the vector is on X. I'm a little bit of I've done this so quickly I can go back and say, okay, I've got some time. Let me tweak that and move that around. Well, using a vector, it all still has history. I can grab the curve with the CVs at either end that's used to drive and create the vector, bump it around, and my projection line comes around with it. It's really handy. So that's how I do the front end. I've got a curve I design in 3D. And then I have a vector that comes out based on a 1 degree curve, and I dial that guy around until I get that nice cutting line, that tool, trim it, blend it with the front wheel flat, and that's done. Okay? All right. Build the side glass. I told you guys before, Although this probably runs contrary to what you might hear from a lot of other modelers, I actually build the outer greenhouse first, without windows, with nothing. And I use the 2D curves to project back through that thing, and there's my window opening. Okay, obviously at some point along the way, there will be a piece of glass there and the designer can see it. I can show the designer a section down the H point, the midpoint of the car, if they want to see that, great, whatever, to make sure the tumble home is about where they want it, the whole bit. In this case, the rest of the car has been blocked in. Designer lights for the shoulder, cant rail, top of the car, side of the car, everything is looking good. Even the fenders are all about where they need to be. Now I can build the glass. And like I said, if I have the opportunity to do something near Class A or just the Class A process, do it. It's great. It just makes life easier for everyone else down the line. In this case, I love the Helix Revolve. There's a really awesome tool. There's a really awesome section of the Revolve tool now. Helix and barrel. Depending on which parameters you have to work with and how patient you are, it will automatically plot out. Remember the, what was it, 4,000 millimeter barrel you used to have to make and tilted it away and bring it in a little bit, chop it in half, cut it at the B pillar so no one really notices, but we got to make sure the thing is a barrel that rolls onto the door. Does anybody else understand what I'm talking about? Remember that? We used to have to manually build glass that rolls into the car. Now Alias has a tool for us that builds the barrel. As you move around the parameters, it keeps a perfect barrel wherever it's going to be. I'm not going to build the outer side of the car that way. Okay, that's the part of the car that needs to relate to the overall look of the car. I tell the designer, no, don't worry about it, I'm going to poke the hole through, I'll show you what it looks like with the window. I'll deal with making the glass the proper way in a little bit. I just want to make sure you're happy with the volumes of the car first. Cool? Got it? All right. And when they're happy, now I build the glass correctly. It becomes my challenge now, otherwise I've got egg on my face and I wasted a lot of time, it becomes my challenge now to get that perimeter looking nice all the way around. Which takes a little bit of love. I got to get in there, I got to be honest, I got to get in there and nudge it around a little bit, nudge around the curve it's driving, and nudge around the parameters of that tool until it's averaging itself out really well, and I've got almost a consistent perimeter on the whole thing. Tie it in with that little track piece, we're going to run it up in black plastic anyway, looks great, nobody knows. Okay, so again, like I said, the side window thing is a Class A process. It's a proper barrel. I love looking at models, guys. I love looking at Alias models and student portfolios and digital renderings of a piece of glass on the side of the car that comes back to a taper. That's great. When you look at the highlight down the side of the glass and the highlight dives down to the front A-pillar, we've all seen this sort of thing, or pinches back to the back corner window in the back and there's no opera window in the back, that window is supposed to roll down the door? How's that work? So what I do is, if it's going to be sent for a rendering, which again guys, a lot of the work that we do in Southern California is sketch modeling stuff. It's got to be sent off to the mothership and approved via Powerwall before they say, okay, make the full scale and all that. So it's got to look like an awesome rendering. I try to do the window as realistic as I can. Gives us awesome highlights, everything works. And everything stacks up behind this. The B pillar will look great behind that. Okay, the actual true angle of the tumble home of the car is more realistic because the whole thing has been built properly. Like I said, if I have the opportunity without wasting too much time to build something in the Class A way, which in this case is awesome, I'm going to do it. The wheel flats is another example. Anyway, okay, so we've got a little bit of time for examples and questions here in a little while. I'm motoring through this pretty quick. Like I explained before, when to let go of the past. Okay, I understand there are some folks that really like to not rely on history at all. They've had problems with this sort of thing. I'll be honest and I'll tell you there are some tools in Alias that don't seem to have very good memory. Some of these tools, you move things around and they go crazy. That's not cool. Some of the tools are actually okay. You can move the curves around and everything is fine. Skins, they do quite well. You can move the curves around and they until you really tweak the thing or you cross it over itself where the skin can't figure out how to do the proportional crown, for the most part it works. Freeform blends is the one that's fairly dangerous. Like I told you guys, a lot of what I do, a lot of the process I use here is freeform blends. It's about 30 to 40% of the surfaces on this car. So when it comes time to move around the curves, you kind of need to know that what you're working with skins before you start tying in the corners. I kind of need to know that from the designer before I work on the next area of it. So I'll say that could be a drawback. Like, look, hey, I've done every skin I can think of. It's time to build the corners of this car. Can you come by and make sure you're happy with the volume of this car? Because I'm going to start to work, and as I do this, the freeform blends don't like to move. They don't like to have their parents, if you will, change on them. They go nuts. So at this point, we've got it all blocked into theoreticals. I don't want anybody moving as I go to build my fillets and blends. There's going to be a lot of projecting and trimming happening in here. So I don't want anything moving around on me, be it a parent or the child surface in there somewhere. I don't need a freeform blend going nuts. That's the one that I kind of fear, is the freeform blends. They tend to go crazy on me. So I blow away the history of the whole thing. At this point, I'm done. This phase, obviously, I saved the file ahead of it. not sure you guys can see it. Not really, the res isn't very good on these screens, but I actually keep the file numbers. I save my files all day long. By the end of the day, I've got 75, 80 files. At the end of the day, I might delete, the first 3/4 of the day and leave just a few at the very end there. But basically, I do this because I've had files crash on me. And I don't understand why. Alias just doesn't want to open this file anymore. So in this case, that might be the last one that you save. You save the one that's got all the history, done, put it to bed. This one, blow away the history. Now it's time to work on fillets and transitions. Nothing's going to move on you. Technically, the car's good. You still got all the curves in there, you still got everything else. If the designer comes back, if you've lost those files and the designer comes back, you can still come back and rebuild this skin between those curves. They're still there. You've still got the whole thing in wireframe, okay? So, okay, the cant rail areas for freeform blends. Remember I told you before, don't worry. The cant rail is often a very important area for people. The way that I start it, the way that I teach the classes to do it, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to design a pattern on the ground. This is offset from that intersection that you got from the side of the car to the top. That makes a shape. You can even duplicate edges if you want, project it or move them all flat, move their CVs all flat down to the ground. There's your pattern. Then just offset them in. Whatever you want to do. What I do is I create a gap around the entire car. Let's forget about the side for a minute. I just move in the whole edge. I move in a little bit. Okay, so now, and I've had students make this mistake where they only do the 1/2 of this process and they don't forget, they forget the sides of the car. What I'm doing is I'm setting myself up, obviously we all know this, every car accelerates as it gets to the ends and then it snaps down around the cant rail. I've known designers who like to have a skin that rolls across the whole top of the car and then they grab the CV rows and they just nudge them all out. Okay, fair enough, that's great. You still got to do some kind of corner or a blend that goes around that corner and rolls down to the bottom of the car. In my case, I just run a typical skin with proportional crown over the whole top of the car, trim it back, and connect that snap, that acceleration is all in a freeform blend. If I want it to be wider, bring those curves in. These curves that I've done here, that are on the floor, move them in. I slide those guys in, project them up to the top of the car. I've made my gap even wider. Their acceleration is now longer. Everybody understand what I'm talking about? I'm basically building the gap that's later going to become a freeform blend that becomes the cant rail. Now, first few times I showed everybody this. I went out to Germany, we worked on this process. I came on back to America, I did this in San Juan. It was a disaster. I had 3 or 4 people in the class. Everybody was trying to do a G2 to G2 alignment with a freeform blend all the way around the corner. Nobody got this to work. And I had all these guys, and it's like, I got one more day of class, and nobody's enjoying it. What do I do? Okay. So to make this process of, like I said, the easier process even easier, what I do is I do a G2 to G0 alignment, and then I run a fillet around that. It's fine. Okay, I told you guys, I've actually skipped it in the way that I've talked. You work so hard to get the top one together, what you also need to do is come down the side of the car and lower that edge all the way down. What you're doing is you're setting up where your theoretical used to be. You've backed away your top edge, you also need to back away the bottom edge a little bit. So you freeform blend down to G0, and then you run a fillet down that piece. Okay? So this shows, this part here represents it's been trimmed back, trimmed down. This is the G2 to G0. The next step after that would be to run a fillet. I'm talking about something different now. This is the transition that covers up this piece. We're kind of hopping around a little bit. This is, if I go back a little bit, there should be a theoretical. Yeah, that one doesn't have its fillet made yet. Okay? So in this case, I'm explaining how I do the back. I usually wait until most of the car is together before I start doing blends. The cant rail's done. We know that's okay. It's been refined. It's got the fillet that runs around it. Again, delete the history when I'm done with that area. I don't want anything. Anytime I have freeform blends in the mix, I try to get through it, save the file, delete the history, move on to the next area. Okay? After that's done, the transition's in there. Then I go around the whole thing and I fillet it. Okay? I run auto fillets around the entire thing. Okay, and then the last but not least, this is what I love to see people doing. I was out in North Carolina. We have a studio out there that works with some of the trucking companies. And I saw some of the people actually taking a lot of time developing Y fillets before the rest of the car is done. Dude, Y fillets take the longest time. It's the most art getting that together. And if the rest of the body isn't together yet, don't do that. Okay, so I wait to the very last bit to do the Y fillets. Okay, I run the fillets all around it. It's all been blocked in. The designer's happy with it. Okay, you good? You cool? As I build all the fillets, I leave little holes everywhere in the car body where it comes around to where all the Y fillets need to be. And then when there's time, I get back to that stuff. Sometimes I never did. Sometimes I'll leave parts like that little corner up there will just stay a hole. It looks fine in the rendering. Just render it in an angle you don't see it. It's fine. Rather than spend part of my day before the rear of the car is put together, rather than spend half my day doing that, okay? So that was it for the actual formal presentation, okay? The rest of the time, we've got about 20 minutes now to actually, if there's any step of the way, like I said, you guys, any questions, anything you want, tell me the step, we can go back to it, and I can open up Alias and I can actually show you what, how I go through that. This would be a time. Yeah.
On the step 18, you mentioned about the Helix option on Revolve.
Yes.
I'm not so familiar with that. Could you explain a little more
Sure.
about Helix, what you get from there?
This is 19. 18. Okay. So in this case, like he's saying, he's got the Helix to make here. What I'll do is I'll actually, let's see, modify copy of the 3D shoulder. So the 3D curve that was used to make this is floating there. Obviously, it's a little skin that runs in between the thing. What I need, though, is I need the greenhouse to be slightly inside of this thing. I need that curve, but I need a copy of it. It's inside to make the glass. Okay, so at this point, let's leave the presentation. And let's go to, where are you? Like I said, I save all these files, so I have this stuff. Let's go find the one where we're using the Helix. Let's see here. Where are you? Greenhouse tail. Looks like it's no, we need a hole for the window first. Punch it out. There it is, punched out. And where's our glass? There it is. There it is. Okay. So that's the first one. I think that might be the first one. We'll go with this one. All right. Yeah, duh. It's in the title of the file. Helix style glass. Glass Revolve is my new friend. Now, something else I do often, guys. I learned this through a bit of a disaster while working at Fisker. There was a problem with, I worked on the tail lamp assembly, and the engineering department, everybody all of a sudden came around me, and they wanted to know how this got made to this point. So I keep a logbook, I keep track of all the comments and all the changes people request, but I also need to show them what file we were at that point. At that time, all I would have is a bunch of numbers. I don't know what's what. And I got a half a dozen people behind me standing there staring at me. So what I do, as you can see, if I come back to list, I leave little notes for myself. Makes it so much easier than just looking at numbers. And it's amazing, it took me a long time to figure this out until I had a disaster and I couldn't find what file I was looking for. Like, oh, leave a little note. It doesn't, Windows doesn't care how long your file name is. It cares how long the folder structure is, but the file name, it doesn't care. Okay, so the Helix command, like you're asking, okay, this guy, what we start with is, let's see if let's take this guy and just template it. Okay, so this curve was a extended copy of this guy, okay? And it requires a little bit of, adjustment to scale it out and get it in place. Again, like I said, guys, it becomes my challenge to find that barrel that stays consistent around the outer greenhouse. It's a little tough. I've had projects that are harder than others. I've had ones I just got lucky and boom, it just worked. Way easier than building the whole thing first and trying to make the camera look nicer on the outside to match the glass. I build the outer greenhouse first. Anyway, in this case, this curve started life as this one over here, copied it, moved it up, scaled it out, did a little bit of this. Obviously happens after the fact, after I've made the thing. I've tweaked this thing around and got it in place to get the consistency that I want around the outer greenhouse. Anyway, the workflow, and it's a little tough to explain to classes that a lot of Alias is trial and error. You play around with stuff until it's working right. And no two fenders in any two cars work the same way. If you had the exact same car and you lined up 10 different modelers, I guarantee you they'll all have completely different ways of getting the same job done. Same goes with the tools. You can say, oh, this is perfect for a skin. It's going to require a little bit of nudging back and forth, okay? So I say that because, bear with me, I'm going to come into the Revolve, and it's going to take a few seconds to get it working properly. The surface is under Revolve, let's see, Revolve. Inside of here, okay? Now it looks like it's the last thing that I used here. Inside of this, it used to be just the Freeform, right? We had the periodic when we wanted to do a sphere, things like that. It's pretty awesome. Now they give us this barrel and helix. They both have their pros and cons. What I can tell you without playing around and going through every little nitty-gritty detail of all of them, the Helix seems to give you tighter control. It's actually better for if you're trying to match scan data, but it tends to rely on something that could possibly give you spans. Okay, it's more of the match curve exactly as opposed to the barrel. The barrel, you throw a degree in there, it keeps it perfect, it's single span, everything is fine. However, if you're trying to match the scan data, I get a little bit better luck out of the Helix than I do barrel. Or maybe it's the other way around, pretty sure, Helix. Anyway, overall, Helix is my best friend. I come in here and I say, all right, I want single segments. I don't want it to break it up into smaller pieces, degree 5, the whole bit. Okay, select curves to revolve. In this case, I'm going to do this. I want that. I accept it. It says, okay, select the first revolve point. Let's see, this is, again, forgive me. Yeah, okay, awesome. Okay, so in this case, it's, let's see, let's turn this scroll stroke, there we go. Okay, you are revolving, what are you, oh, I would have to go the wrong way? Maybe that's why. Undo, let's do it again. So it's curves, accept. Oh, why are you going the wrong way? I'm pretty sure it doesn't want this guy. No, that's definitely not what it wanted. So you grab the thing and you say, give me, let's look at the other one. What did that guy use? It is flat. This must be the file before I modified it. Anyway, to build it, you're going to have to modify the curve that you use to make it. Actually, it's coming off a Revolve somewhere. Standard uses I believe one of the vectors, X, Y, or you can do picked. You can throw it in space somewhere and move it around a lot like we would if we were actually making the barrel the old-fashioned way, 4,000 millimeter barrel, cocked the whole bit to match the car. But in this case, like I said, the interface, the way that it works, it asks you to pick the curve, and then it asks you to, I gotta accept it, and it asks you to, oh, now you're really messing with me. It's giving me a hard time. That's the interface. You're gonna have to mess around with it. Why it's not giving me the rounded bit. Oh, I think I know why, guys. See, this curve's been moved around. It doesn't touch the thing anymore. I know why now. So I take this guy, and I put that right there. Actually, let's line the camera up, like that. And then I put that somewhere in there. Okay, it's actually touching the curve it needs to use. Don't make a fool of me now, Alias. Don't you do it. Trust me, guys, it doesn't bother me. I've had this happen enough times in front of the class. It's like, I just got to tell you, it's Alias, it happens. Okay, so you pick the curve, hit accept, and it says, all right, give me a couple points. So you come over here, you come over there, and boom, there you go. Now you've got a revolve. The nice thing about this, not only, you don't have to extend. If you need to be overbuilt, you can just grab the little grippies here. I call them grippies, not really sure what Autodesk likes to call these things. You can grab these guys and make it as long and overbuilt as you want. Okay, you can even come in, I believe you can come into this curve and extend it. Merge turned on. As we make the curve longer, it goes with it as well. So it's easy to update the thing. It's entirely a barrel. The whole thing is believable. If I come in here and I look at the highlight of it, it's got that nice, awesome highlight down the entire thing. Okay? And I think we're looking at two of them. What's that other one? Is that the one that I just made? Yeah. I don't know why we have two servers there. I am dealing with a file that's been already made. Anyway, that's the interface to the Helix. Somehow this curve got moved off the thing, and it's doing what I ask. It collects the curves, asks for a couple of points. Those are the points that I give it. It's just going to make a straight line. That's what it was doing. It wasn't sitting on the curve. So somehow this curve here got moved over. It should be sitting on the section that we designed through there. Okay?
Did you adjust the CV to say on that plan view curve?
Yes, this guy here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The curve won't touch anymore, but will it still?
Yeah, well, you'll see it morph. You'll see it change. Let's see. Let's go back to this one. I'm not sure where this one comes from. Let's just pull that one away. Let's do this one. Where'd you come from? Oh. Does anybody else love the fact that Alias doesn't like Control-Z very well? Love it. Did a lot of work with Maya, and Control-Z works quite well in Maya. Let's do Revolve. Helix, select the curve. There we go. Hey. I think my computer's bogging on me. Dude, what are you doing? Reset. Whoa, you guys seeing this? It's super delayed. Okay, hold on. What's going on? I don't know, Skype or Chrome or PowerPoint, something is messing with it. Let's do this. Hello. Dude, it's really bogging. Bear with me. We got to shut some things down. I promise I only hit Control-Delete once. There we go. Does Windows still shut down completely if you hit it twice? Remember those days? Does anybody? Does it actually shut itself off if you do Control-Delete twice? Let's see here. Yeah, let's do memory. A couple of guys in the back. He's fixing his RAM. I'm out of here. Okay, let's get rid of that one and process. Gotta love, there we go, Chrome, dude. Turn that off. I don't need this stuff running. We're pushing it with Alias. Let's turn this stuff off. Okay, there we go. You should run a little bit better now. I was hoping for better than that. Dude, it's still hogging really hard. So go to curve, wait for it. Okay, are you happy? Anybody else here talk to their software while they're modeling? I do. I try to talk nice until it just makes me angry and then I start cussing. It's like all the gloves are off now, man. I tried to be nice. I tried to work with you. You're not cooperating. Okay, I know it's gonna come. There it is. This is amazing. Okay, so somebody had the question of if we modify this curve, it has history. Yes, of course it does. And that's part of the game of actually finding the sweet spot of the offset from the glass to that surrounding area of the side.
The reason I asked is because you said those curves had to intersect.
Yeah.
They no longer intersect.
Well, in that area. Right. I mean, obviously, if you have exact engineering data and they're saying that the tumble home, the barrel of the window has to be this exact number, okay, then you can't come off that curve. You can't move it around. What you can do is you can dial up the math of this curve. It's running plan view all the way down the way there. So when you move around CVs, the middle one isn't moving with that curve at all. You could also split it into two. So it's actually chopping right there at that section, and just don't move the first 2 or 3 CVs where they come together there, right? So you can mess with the ends, and it's absolutely doing nothing at that area of the B pillar, I guess we'd call it. So in this case, yes, you came around here, and you grab this CV over here, and you start. Oh, there now my computer's wanting to play along. It just needed a moment. Okay, yes. See, we can tug this guy around, and I'm not going to shade up the entire thing because I don't want to. Go back into whatever just happened a minute ago. But there, as I move this thing around, I'm able to adjust the gap as it relates with the shoulder down the side of the car, that sort of thing. This requires a little bit of time. But again, way easier to go this route, guys, than the other way around, as in build the cant rail, the window glass, the glass first, and then build a body that looks nice around it, that goes to the shoulder. I've never liked doing it that way. I did what I was told when I was in school, I did it that way when I went into my first gig was with BMW, did it that way. It just never made sense to me. Let's make the outer form work and then poke a hole and build the glass properly inside of it. It just makes more sense, and it's quicker. All right, other questions? We have 7 minutes. At first I was thinking I gave too much time and I blew through the presentation too far, but as you can see, Elias needs some time. So we're doing all right. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Kind of got lost a little bit, just probably me.
It's okay.
Step 1, you have 2D curves and build how to get all that stuff.
Yes.
And then you said step 2, build walls for 3D projection.
Yes. Let's see.
I understand what you're doing.
Let's do F5. Let's see.
Basically, I kind of want to understand, how did you get
Well,
those 3D
I'll tell you what.
created?
right, rather than go through this presentation, let's jump back into Alias. Let me show you, because again, like I said, I've got all the files. I'm going to turn off the presentation. We're done with that. Okay, let's go back to icons. And I'm glad you asked that, because if anybody in the room doesn't get this part, it's essential. This is the coolest thing. And I got this as part of the training when I was taught the way to do the Technicon training of these classes, and I think this is just awesome, because I don't like pulling around CVs in 3D space. I think it's a total waste of time. Yes. I mean, I've seen people that do it all with a curve with a lot of spans. And they don't care, because obviously the surfaces you're going to build with these curves are chopped into little bits, and they don't care. They can get away with single span versions. But still, they're still messing with something that is way more complex than it needs to be, and they're still moving around way more CVs than they need to, and then their curve plot is going everywhere when they do this, right? So I'm not sure if let's see, in this point here, we've got this made. Let's see what this looks like. I think this is hey, where's the one I had selected? There it is. Okay, yes, replace it. Okay, in this case, dial the transparency back a little bit of the canvases. Okay. There we go. So in this case, we don't have any of these 3D curves made yet. Okay. So now, like you were saying, how do we build the thing? How do we get the thing in 3D? I've seen a lot of people. I used to do it when I first learned Alias, and I was doing this stuff in school. You grab this plan view curve and you tug it up in space and you start bumping on the CVs. Okay. I don't have time for that. If you want to offset in the Z direction, if that's the way you like to work it, so you have even more history, great. That's up to you. I'll typically just take this curve, Control C, Control V. Move it up in the Z direction high enough that I know that when I project this baseline of my windows at it, it's okay. Okay, so it only needs to be about that high. Good enough. Now I come in here and I'm going to make a skin. No proportional crown at the moment. I have that option later if I want to. I don't want to get ahead of you guys. Let's do this. I have this, and there's my skin. This is what I meant by the wall. Okay, now I've made a wall to project the other view from, okay? And it's kind of cool, because in the past, like I said, you'd have to grab CVs, bring them up, do it. And in this case, all I have to do, select the surface, go to Project. Sorry guys, I don't have a very, first of all, let me back up and tell you this story. I always have to preface this when I talk to people. I used to have the crazy marking menus. I used to have the toolbars all over the place. I have to teach classes, and I cannot rely on that stuff. After a year of doing this, of teaching classes like this, I've got to say, I'm actually happier and I feel more free getting very comfortable with the default layout, because when I go into car companies, I don't have to wait the day for the IT guy to come around and turn on my USB port so I can load my shells. I can get to work. I'm okay. I'm not as efficient without my crazy, marking menus, but I can get the job done. And I show the classes how to do this from the ground up, and everybody wants to know how to modify that kind of stuff. And I tell them, guys, be a pro first, learn the software inside and out, and then later on. Don't push yourself to dive into that just yet. Anyway, so again, bear with me if the shelf and everything looks simple. I try not, actually we build the shelf together as we go through the classes. So there's the surface. I'm going to project in the Y direction. As I mentioned before, instead of curves on surface, which we usually always have, I go to curves, and I always say match original. There it is, curve fit. That's what they called it in Alias. I say match original. This gives me the ability to go back to my original piece of geometry and dial up the math up and down as I need it. Okay, if I'm trying to align something to it, it's just not doing, and the curve plot's all choppy, the curve comb, okay, I can dial up the math the original and get the job done. In this case, I want to build, say, the surface right here. This guy. And oh, by the way, look, it needs to be more than one. Let's just do all of these together, all as one. I do that, and now I've got, let's delete those locators. I've got all these guys in 3D ready to rock and roll. Okay? If I want to take the time, now granted, these were all made super light, right? degree 3, and that's a degree 3. Okay? If I throw a curve plot on here, I'm guessing it's going to be pretty jagged. Yeah. I like it cleaner than that. Okay, I demand, I've had so much fun doing the Class A stuff and the little roller coaster. I demand everything that I build be a little bit cleaner than that. So, in this case, I'm going to come back to my originals. Remember the days of changing the degree and you lose all the history? This is so cool. Alias allows you to do this now. The simplest little things make me excited. Now I can come back and do this, except I still have history. Okay, now I can come back in. Yeah, are you not aligned? Ooh, at some point along the way we lost our alignment. Let's do curvature. That's fine. And why are you not fixing? Well, hey, that did something. Oh, you're starting to bog on me again. Revert, 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 revert. Okay, there you are. Come on, dude, don't do it. Don't do it again. See, the computer's way of saying, it's 4, stop. The class is over. All right, so in this case, being careful to have the proper view and the proper curve clicked on. There we go, you're aligned. Okay, now I can come in, work on my acceleration with these CVs. I think what I got here is an awfully flat curve that was in 2D, and it's running into something either that or it's positive in one direction and going into negative, and it doesn't quite, the curve plot isn't quite nice for me. What I'd like to do is modify those. They always tell us in studios you don't want the inflection point, right? You don't want the curve going from positive to negative. You want that to be right on the bit in between. For sketch modeling, I'll cheat it. The last CV or whatever, I'll bend so the curve plot's starting to lead into the next one. It just makes everything work nicer. Another point to make here, maybe one of the last points to make, it's awfully important. If you've taken the time to do this so nicely, if I go back to the presentation and find you the slide, if you've focused on nice, sweet 2D curves, made it into very nice, clean 3D curves with nice curve plots, you don't have to align anything. That's the best thing about it. When you go to skin this thing, and I skin the side, I make a couple of skins across the back, they automatically work in the V direction because everything else is so sweet in 3D. Very seldomly do I need to align the two skins beside each other to one another. If it's a complex corner like the top of that C-pillar that wraps around the car, okay, I gotta do a square in one of those patches and make sure it's aligned all around. But if you take the time to do this, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time nudging around and aligning all the surface patches. Personally, I think it's a whole lot easier to work in 2D than 3D with multiple rows of CVs in either way. Okay? So that's a projection method, right? That's the wall and projecting the curves. And like I said, in this case, are we the same length? Let's go to F6. Yeah, okay, the thing is long enough. If this surface here were shorter, right? If I took these curves, that's not going to give me the one. I got to go back to perspective. Okay, I've took this curve, and where are you at? This guy. And I extended with merge turned on, extrapolate. Let's say I want to do this one, holding my shift key, and I want to do that one as well. Okay, if I extend this thing backwards like this, or I guess shorten it, if you will, see what happens? It chops it short. That's one of the things to look out for when you're choosing which curves you want to use to make that wall. And again, doesn't matter how you do it. I like using skins because it gives me the ability to use a proportional crown to give it the whole thing a little bit of lean. By the way, I can just show you. Come in here, query edit, come in here, proportional crown. Have you guys all heard of the super secret slider, by the way? You guys all know of this? Yeah, one guy in the room saying yes. Alt, we call it the super secret slider. So at a proportional crown, this is great for when you have something like the bumper skim that goes from wheel flat to wheel flat across the back of the car. Well, I dial this thing all the way up to 1, and it's just not wide enough. I need a bit more booty behind that car. I need the thing to be way out there, right? So I hold my Alt key down, and I can really click and drag this thing way out there, and it keeps going. A lot of times in Alias, this will work. Sometimes it doesn't. I think they maybe do it so it doesn't crash. But this allows me to really dial exactly where I want that thing to be. That's why I like to use skins. Okay? Again, a lot of people are like, a multi-surface draft or a rail, that's just one operation. Why do you use curves? Look, if you don't like dealing with two curves, I don't mind clicking the top and the bottom CV and moving them together. If you don't want to do that, then just do an offset. Do an offset in the Z direction at whatever, 100 millimeters, and you're done. Okay? So that's sort of the core behind this process. That's how I get my quick 3D curves. I project. All right? Any other questions? All right. I hope you guys have found this beneficial. Let me go back to my, let's see, desktop, AU. Probably should have just minimized it. We'll just open this up. There we go. Same thing as a presentation. I don't want to go through all that PowerPoint stuff again. That's something else that I typically don't like to do when I do the classes. I roll through part of the lesson in Alias, have everybody come away from their screens and take notes, and then go on back. I typically don't like to do classes with PowerPoints, because I remember those days. I remember taking classes and just getting tired, and I can never stand the guy that stands there, guy or girl that stands there and just reads a whole paragraph. I can read the paragraph myself. Don't do that. So anyway, that said, if anybody have any other questions for me? Everybody's got it. They're ready to go home. They're going to hang out in their hotel room tonight and check this 2D curve 3D thing and build the whole car body. No gambling. They're all going to make car bodies. I love it. Awesome. Okay. Thanks for your time, guys.